Thank you so much. I was afraid I was going to have to give my librarian. I hate to end the music, but like I said, if we don't get started, we can't get back to the party. So, please, everyone, find your seat. If you don't know, it should be on your name tag. Every table is a winner, so I'm gonna get started, but I think everyone can hear me even if you're still milling about. I don't have a library voice. Hello, everybody. Welcome. I am Beth Whitaker, Associate Dean in the Libraries and Director of the Spencer Research Library, and I think I recognize nearly all of you, and I'm looking forward to meeting those of you I don't recognize. It is my pleasure to welcome you all tonight to Rhapsody in Jayhawk Blue, the Centennial celebration of Watson Library. Yeah. So my job this evening is to kick off the celebration and keep it moving. In the spirit of the evening, I will be finding every opportunity to use 1920s slang. I'm no blue nose, but a surprisingly large portion of the lingo seems to revolve around dancing and drinking, so be warned. It has been 100 years since the Watson Library opened. The place has changed in many ways, some deliberate and some not over the years. And the work that has gone into commemorating this special library for our Centennial season highlights that everyone has Watson memories. Please bear with me as I quickly share a few of my own. I will not beat my gums. When I was wrapping up my history BA, I had to bring my medieval Latin up to speed in a hurry. So I spent Saturdays at a particular table downstairs in the reference department, cramming with a classmate. At the time, food and drink were not permitted in the library, so we would take turns sneaking into the carrels to eat a quick lunch while the other person held the table covered with dictionaries and reference books, and we hid behind it like a fort. I must have eaten dozens of secret peanut butter sandwiches that semester. Later on, when I was working on my master's degree, I had another memorable encounter in Watson. I suppose only a few of you will know the name Eleanor Simons. Yeah! But she was a legend of a reference librarian. A bit intimidating, dare I say a tough broad, with her British accent and her no-nonsense attitude. I was researching some financial documents from the Spencer Research Library, and I was hoping to find a source in these barely internet times that would tell me about the amount of dough changing hands between families. Was it more like you would pay for a few loaves of bread, or was it more like a year's wages, or something in between? She walked me up and down the aisles, consulting source after source, as we put together the pieces of the puzzle, and that we found in various print reference sources. These two vivid memories prompt me to mention three things that stand out in most people's minds when they think about Watson Library: people, place, and information. Watson is a special place, no doubt. It's especially special tonight. Students talk about the reverence that the space inspires, the peace that fills them when they read and study in these spaces, but it's the people and the information that truly put Watson at the heart of the university. Tonight, when I look out over this absolutely amazing space, things are a little different than what we normally see. There are no typical college students, heads down over their laptops, listening to music and drinking cup after cup of Joe, sometimes swanky Joe. Instead, our beloved Watson is all decked out in its ritzy best, and every one of you definitely look like the cat's meow, too. So without further ado, we'll begin our program. Let's welcome Provost and Executive Vice Chancellor Barbara Bichelmeyer to the podium for a few words. Thank you so much for being here.
Good evening, everyone. It is actually kind of a remarkable thing to see this kind of a gathering and this group of people in this space that usually is pretty full about this time of night with students who are maybe have their heads in the books, but maybe and more likely are actually talking to each other, engaging with each other, having experiences that they don't have when they're simply in their classroom spaces or in their own buildings. So let me start by thanking all of you for taking the time to be here tonight for this very special occasion, and thanking Dean Smith and her amazing team on not only reaching this milestone, but recognizing this as an opportunity to bring so many people together and to actually use the Centennial of Watson to create so many community building events that are happening not only this month, but over the course of this year. It's a great way to use what really is a once-in-a-lifetime celebration. You know, when we think about what libraries are to a university and what this particular building, what Watson is to a university, I want to note that it starts with the fact that in a university, everybody is a learner. Everybody is a learner. Students are learners, but more importantly, faculty do the job that faculty do. They could do any number of things. They're all brilliant people. But they choose to be in universities because what research is structured, programmatic, lifelong learning using whatever method, whether it's scientific method or historical and archival research or investigative journalism or whatever it may be. We're here because we all value and love to learn, because it makes us better people and it makes the world a better place. And libraries are the foundation of that. Depending on whose history you read about how higher education came to be and what its purpose is, it basically goes something like this: that there was a point in time where we needed to collect and curate the artifacts of civilization. And we put those in buildings that had ivory towers and moats and gates. But ivory towers and moats and gates weren't what we needed to protect the artifacts of civilization. We needed people coming together and understanding those artifacts and questioning those artifacts and thinking about what those meant for the future and bringing people together so that masters and students could be in dialogue and actually learn from each other and create a better world. And that's what libraries are when they're at their best. They are full of synergistic activities. They are interdisciplinary. They facilitate and support discovery and education and service, and they privilege the aspect and the experience of learning over knowing and over objects and over things. It's not simply books. It's what happens when we open the pages of those books. It's what happens when we start talking about the ideas that are in those books. It's actually a value proposition that says that people engaging together in learning and discovery are what makes us as human beings great, and that libraries and universities do that. They facilitate a promise that connects people and ideas across the ages. This is about a celebration of libraries, but I need to remind everybody, the libraries at KU are about 160 years old. They're not 100 years old. This particular facility is 100 years old, and it's a magnificent facility as well. But we think about this, and we think about this as the grand old building that's a conservator of the past. But if you were here on any given day and you saw the students and the faculty and the staff who are coming together, you would know that this is a place that drives discovery through research and through education and through communication. And it is what makes the university great. So it recognizes that universities aren't simply about the dissemination of knowledge. I gotta say that again. Universities aren't simply about the dissemination of knowledge. We're about creating engaging educational experiences, whether that's in the classroom or whether that's in non-credit bearing activities or whether that's in museums such as the Spencer Research Library and collections that we hold across the campus. Libraries are a space that is a service to everything that we do at KU and everything that is good about higher education, because it's about talent development. So I want to congratulate all of us for having the understanding, the mindset to take time to celebrate the libraries and this space tonight. I want to thank you for being stewards of this institution. This is 100 years old, and back to Beth's story, as many of you know, I have 4 diplomas from the University of Kansas. I've spent a lot of time in stacks. I've spent a lot of time, actually, when I should be studying, staring at the amazing views of the Kansas River Valley on one side and the Wakarusa River Valley on the other side. And I've spent a lot of time in great conversations and learning things and opening books that I didn't even know existed. As I was walking in the door, our executive dean of the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences was walking up the stairs. I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Well, I got caught looking at a book over there." And so I was a little bit late getting up the stairs. That's what libraries do. They introduce us to things we didn't even know existed, that we didn't even understand were possible. And we're celebrating a moment in time, and we are stewards of this institution at this moment in time. But again, libraries here are 106 years old, this building's 100 years old. Our job at this moment, which is a transformational moment in higher education, and everything that we do and every decision we make as leadership at this university is about figuring out how do we continue to be really important and relevant to this moment and the challenges at this time in history, but also to make sure that this place is healthy in another 100 and 150 years for the next generations who need what we do. So thank you for your understanding of that, and thank you for your support.
Obviously, I want to thank Provost Bichelmeyer, but I just want to say, and how, right? You get it. Thank you so much. So we're going to take a break from talking about one of my favorite topics, libraries, and move on to another favorite topic, which is food. So I'll send a shout out at this moment to Brancado's Catering for their amazing contributions to tonight's celebration. They are definitely hitting on all sixes. So let's take a break and enjoy some wonderful food and conversation, and I will see you in a little while back up here.
A Jayhawk Boulevard landmark and perpetual place of discovery and welcome, Watson Library is celebrating 100 years at the heart of the KU community. Watson has seen tremendous growth and change over the last century, a necessary evolution that has not always proved easy. The persistence and grit of library leaders and the devotion of the KU community have fortified this campus icon as much as its lofty limestone walls. The birth of the library collection harkens back to the beginnings of the university itself, first occupying a room in North College, then moving to Old Fraser Hall before the construction of Spooner Hall in 1894, the first freestanding library building. By the early 1920s, Spooner was bursting at the seams without sufficient room for the growing student body to read and study. Plans for a new library were set in motion. Construction began in 1923, and the new library opened its doors on September 11, 1924, to much anticipation and excitement. The building was named after longtime librarian Carrie Watson, a remarkable figure in the evolution of KU libraries and a witness to the history of the university and the state of Kansas. Impressive and beautiful with towering windows, red tile roof, and polished wood interiors, the new library was embraced by the campus community. However, concerns about the library's size and capacity loomed. Many dedicated library leaders and generations of the university community have advocated for Watson improvements, including 5 additions completed between 1938 and 1963. The most recent large-scale renovation was completed in 1982. The central hub of the largest library collection in the state, KU libraries house 5.8 million items across 6 locations and host nearly 500,000 visits a year, advancing research, teaching, and learning at the intersection of people and ideas. With its team of librarians and expert staff, Watson Library is ready for the next evolution with the rapidly changing needs of the campus community fueling it ever onward.
Swell. I really have the best job and the worst job tonight. I gotta stop you from socializing. I gotta talk while you're trying to eat. But I want to remind everyone and let everyone know that the bar will open up after remarks, and we also have our photo booth. We'll have dancing, so just bear with us. Okay, now I get to welcome to the podium Dean Carol Smith. Those of you who have met her know Carol has brought tremendous energy and enthusiasm to KU libraries in a comparatively brief time. She's a real live wire. You can't escape her passion for libraries as community platforms as she works across campus and the state. If you haven't had a chance to meet her, please take some time tonight. You will not be disappointed. And now we all get to experience a little bit of that energy from the podium. Carol, over to you. Come on up. I'm just... Okay, yeah. Set it up for you.
Thank you. I have energy, but I'm walking those steps very slowly in these heels. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thank you, Beth, for teaching us 1920s lingo. Thank you, Provost Bichelmeyer, for those inspiring remarks and for setting the stage for tonight. I actually don't know that I need to say any more about libraries following that. And welcome and thank you to all of you for coming out this evening and in such high style, right? Claps for yourself. Each of you is here tonight because you care deeply about our libraries. You've always been here for our libraries, and our libraries are better for your support. So thank you to all of you. Before I dive into my remarks, I would like to acknowledge a few folk in the room, beginning with two individuals who have been here for KU Libraries in the past and who traveled from pretty far to be here tonight because their dedication to KU Libraries is so steadfast. We are lucky enough tonight to have not one, but two prior deans of KU Libraries with us tonight, and I would like them to stand and to be recognized as I call their names. First, Kevin Smith. Where are you, Kevin? Kevin served as Dean of KU Libraries from 2016 to 2022, guiding us through those challenging COVID years, and he is now Director of Libraries at Colby College in Waterville, Maine. Kevin, thank you for your years of service and for being here tonight. I'd also like to recognize Lorraine Harricombe. Lorraine, if you could please stand. Many of you know her, of course. Lorraine served as Dean of Libraries from 2006 to 2015, just prior to Kevin, and she has been Director and Vice Provost of the University of Texas Libraries since leaving KU, and she did recently announce her forthcoming retirement in August of next year. Lorraine, thank you for being here, and advance congratulations on your new life adventures. Thank you, Lorraine. As I said, everyone in the room here tonight shares the goal of advancing KU Libraries, and some among you lead us in those efforts. I cannot thank all of you by name, but we can acknowledge tonight three of the leaders among us who have been so central in guiding the work of all of us. If they could please stand to be recognized as I named them. First, Ken Stevens, if you could please put your Blue Note signature cocktail down and be recognized. Ken is the chair of our KU Library Board of Advocates for the next 2 years. He is also the curator of a capsule collection, which is just around the corner to the left, called Roaring Reads. So if you are looking for a good book tonight, there is a reading list and some very fine selections by Ken just around the corner. Thank you for your service, Ken. I'd also like to recognize Janet Sinelli. Janet is the immediate past chair of the Board of Advocates, and she is also co-chair of the Watson Centennial Council, which is the incredibly creative group that I've had the privilege of working with over the past year that made tonight and the entire Centennial season possible. Thank you, Janet. And then among so many I could recognize, I would ask that Janet's fellow Centennial Council Co-Chair Christy McWard, Executive Director of KU Libraries, Office of Communications and Advancement, leader of an absolutely amazing team that shines a bright communications spotlight, and sometimes even blue building uplighting at night on the exterior of Watson Library. She shines a light, and her team shines a light on the essential role of KU Libraries in our institution's mission. Christy, please, thank you for everything that you do. Okay, this is a truly special night as we celebrate a truly remarkable milestone, the 100th anniversary of Watson Library. This occasion invites us to reflect not only on a century of history, but also on the enduring significance of this beloved institution at the University of Kansas and in the heart of all Jayhawks. Because that's what tonight's celebration is really about. It's not about the age of a building. It's about the impact that it has had on generations of Jayhawks since its doors first opened September 11th, 1924, and the impact that it continues to have today. It's about the meaning of the space that we all find ourselves in tonight. Libraries are palaces of the people. They embody everything that we aspire to as a society. Academic libraries are engines of democracy and progress. They are places where anyone can access knowledge and people and tools to succeed. In the history of Watson, we can find the story of KU, and we can also find the story of Lawrence, and we can find the story of Kansas, and yes, we can find the story of America, the story of ourselves. We can find the story of where we have been in the past, who we are as a people, where we are now, and where we are going. So as we honor this milestone, seated at these tables in Watson's grand reading room, I encourage each of you, what am I doing with this light, to reflect on your own story and your own experiences here in Watson Library, within these walls, as we consider the story of the space we find ourselves in this evening. Carrie Watson, for whom Watson Library is named, and the countless others at KU who helped realize the vision of Watson 100 years ago, understood that every great institution of higher learning requires a place where knowledge can be cultivated, preserved, shared, and transmitted to future generations. That is foundational to civilization itself. Providing space for growing collections was, of course, a primary consideration back then when Watson opened, but Watson was always designed to be far more. It was intended to be a sanctuary for ideas, a space where every student and scholar could embark on a journey of discovery and be inspired by their surroundings to do so. The collegiate Gothic architecture of the building, with its stately design and its grand reading room, speaks to that seriousness of purpose that our predecessors envisioned. They envisioned a place of quiet reflection, a place for dedicated study and rigorous intellectual exchange. This space radiates those enduring values and a lasting commitment to preserving and sharing knowledge. The early 20th century, when Watson opened its doors, was a period of rapid growth and change for KU. The Watson Library played a central role in that transformation. Just consider for a moment the world of 1924 when Watson Library first opened its doors. The world was recovering from the Great War, World War I, and society was on the cusp of dramatic change in science, technology, and culture. In this context, Watson Library was designed to be a beacon of hope and progress. Watson was built as a symbol of KU's commitment to fostering a new generation of thinkers, creators, and leaders. And so tonight, as we enjoy this space, we are reminded of those generations who walked through these doors as times around them changed and as they changed the times, because every person who passed through this library in some way, large or small, contributed to the rich tapestry of history and to the story of KU. And over the decades, Watson Library has evolved along with them to meet the changing times while always remaining true to its core mission. KU Libraries is evolving right now in response to the emerging AI age and in response to changing research needs. Libraries have become dynamic, multifaceted spaces where students and scholars can access a vast array of digital resources, collaborate on interdisciplinary projects, and engage with entirely new forms of information. So today, as you move around Watson, you might encounter librarians teaching a class on effective research techniques. But you might also encounter librarians teaching a workshop on how to script in Python. You might pass by library faculty providing consultations to disciplinary faculty on research data management plans or evidence synthesis reviews. You might run into a lecture taking place one floor below us in Watson 3 West. Or in the case of last week, you might run into Charleston and Foxtrot lessons. And when you move about Watson, you might not realize when you pass by a closed door that behind it, librarians are making modern magic happen, digitizing resources, publishing open journals, creating digital humanities projects with faculty and students, making course textbooks open, free, and accessible for a far more affordable KU education, and sharing the scholarly output of all KU researchers with the entire world via our repositories. So much of modern libraries is right at our fingertips, right? And it seems to just be there. But it's only there. That magic only exists for all of us because of the largely unseen work that is taking place every day throughout Watson's halls. I know we are all thankful for the unsung work of library faculty and staff who make libraries the wonders that they are, and many of them are with us here tonight. So thank you for that. Watson Library has not only just embraced, but has led these changes, transforming into a modern hub of learning and innovation. Yet even as we have adapted to new and often intangible technologies, the library's role as physical space and place has remained crucial. There is something irreplaceable about the experience of actually being in a library. A sense of connection to the past, to the community of learners who came before us, a sense of connection with those who might be around us at any given time, and they might be engaged in their own individual studies, but you feel a collective sense of what is happening in the space. In a world where so much of our life is now lived online, the library remains a place of real human connection. And ideas can be not just quietly consumed here, but can be debated, can be developed, and shared by us all. We can feel it around us right now. That is the power of libraries as place. So looking to the future, we have developed a fresh and exciting and future-forward vision for Watson Library to continue its campus role as a vibrant, research-centered flagship and center of intellectual life into the next century, a community platform for learning where both tradition and innovation come together harmoniously. But with this vision comes the recognition that our beloved library, now a century old, requires renewal to meet the needs of future KU generations. Indeed, all libraries require continuous renewal. We are committed to preserving the historic essence of Watson Library while revitalizing its spaces to support modern teaching, research, discovery, and collaboration. Doing so will ensure that Watson Library remains not only an essential conservatory of accumulated human knowledge, but also an essential place where library students and faculty can engage together with the latest technologies, collaborate on cutting-edge research, and as always, connect with each other in meaningful ways to create new knowledge. So tonight, we celebrate not just a building's birthday, but a century of intellectual and cultural enrichment that has shaped KU. We are all here tonight because we care about Watson deeply, and we all look forward to realizing a fresh vision that honors both its rich history and positions it at the forefront of library and university innovation for the next century. I would like to close my remarks by quoting the University Daily Kansan, our student newspaper, from September 1924, 100 years ago upon the opening of Watson's doors. So, quote from the student newspaper, "Watson Library is the dream of the woman for whom it was named, a woman who has graduated from the university and has spent her life working for the real laboratory of the student body." I love that, the real laboratory of the student body. Since her graduation from school, Miss Watson has been building up the library. It was at the very beginning of the growth of the library that Miss Watson began her efforts to make the library one which was worthy of Kansas. She has succeeded. Her efforts have proved worthwhile. She is appreciated. And Watson Hall stands. Fantastic quote from the Daily Kansan. So, I don't have a glass with me, but let's raise our glasses again if you've got anything left in it at this point. Watson Hall stands. Here's to the next 100 years of Watson Library, a future filled with promise, with innovation, with renewal, and continued dedication to the pursuit of knowledge. Thank you. Okay, here comes the fun part. So we are here to celebrate the anniversary of Watson Library, but we have another anniversary of sorts, one that directly relates to tonight's keynote speaker, and one that I would like to share with you. One fine fall day in the life of Watson Library. Imagine this. One Crosby Kemper made his way up the marble steps, maneuvered around the stacks, and located and checked out a book of translated Sumerian documents for an ancient history class he was taking at KU. And several weeks later, he received something I suspect that some of you in the audience have also received. He received an overdue notice for that book of ancient Sumerian documents. That was in 1984. And he must have really liked that book of ancient Sumerian documents, because that book never returned to the library. But there's a plot twist, because today is not just a special anniversary, but it's also a kind of homecoming of sorts for that, because Crosby, I understand that you have something that you would like to give us. Bring it up. This must have been a really great book, Crosby.
I got the notice, too.
There's the notice right there from 1984, 40 years ago today. I am declaring this a fine-free week, by the way. We would like to put the significance of this moment into some perspective for you. From 1984 to 2024, an estimated 5.7 million items were returned to KU libraries by your fellow students. Stay with us. We've prepared a graph to help you visualize this. As you can see, Crosby, 3.3 million undergraduate students returned their books. 2.4 million graduate students returned their books. And Crosby returned 0. We're going to torture you a little further. Another way to look at it, in the 100-year history of Watson Library, Crosby's book was overdue for 40% of that time. You weren't going to go another 60 years. But now, not only has the book returned to us, but so has Crosby, and he has been on quite a journey for those past 40 years since he checked out that book. I would like to tell you a little bit about that. I don't know if it's a little bit. It's an extraordinary journey. So you might be standing here for a little while. I'll give you the podium eventually. Crosby Kemper. Crosby Kemper recently completed his 4-year term as director of the National Institute of Museum and Library Services in Washington, D.C. IMLS, as we all know it, an independent government agency, is the primary source of federal support for our nation's museums and libraries, including this one. Crosby led IMLS through the COVID-19 pandemic, and as one of many accomplishments under his leadership, and one you may have read about in the news at that time, the agency partnered on a scientific study early in the pandemic with the Battelle Research Institute in Columbus, Ohio. The results were published in the Journal of Microbiology and informed national CDC guidelines and yielded recommended practices that gave library and museum directors the confidence to reopen safely. Crosby's tenure included the reestablishment of the President's Committee on the Arts and the Humanities within IMLS and the creation of the Information and Literacy Task Force as charged by the United States Congress to, among other things, conduct research on misinformation and disinformation. Throughout his career, Crosby has been a dedicated advocate for learning and discovery for people of all ages and backgrounds. Prior to his term at IMLS, he served as director of the Kansas City Public Library for 15 years, where he made special event programming a prominent focus, with more than 500,000 people attending the library's evening programs or visiting exhibits. He also gave many inspiring talks to early career librarians, including myself, on subjects like intellectual freedom. And I remember those talks, and I considered him to be a personal and formative mentor. During his tenure at KCPL, the library received multiple awards, including the National Medal for Museum and Library Service in 2008. There's more. Crosby is a creator and host of the Visions of America streaming series, as well as Meet the Past on Kansas City Public Television, work that has garnered 7 Emmy nominations and 2 Emmy Awards. He has chaired the Missouri Commission on the Future of Higher Education and additionally served on various boards, including the Thomas Jefferson Foundation, the Kansas City Symphony, and the Black Archives of Mid-America. He has founded not 1, but 2 Shakespeare festivals, one in St. Louis and one in Kansas City, and he is a member of the Midwest Education Hall of Fame. It is an honor and great pleasure to welcome this champion of literacy and learning, a truly compelling advocate of culture and community, and one of the most overdue patrons at Watson Library, Crosby Kemper, folks.
She won't let me keep it. I would take another 40 years. So thank you very, very much. I expected that I would be greeted by the Kansas Highway Patrol, or at least the campus police today, having done this. And I have to tell you that this is a bad habit of mine. I lived in Lawrence for a while. I've been a regular user of the Watson Library over the years. I've taken some courses at KU and been a resident of Lawrence. And at one point, when I was the library director in Kansas City, it was time to pack up our house in Lawrence and for me to move to Kansas City. And I was going through my books and putting them in boxes. I didn't, unfortunately, find my Sumerian document book that you now have back at the Watson Library, but I did find Thomas Hobbes, the 17th century philosopher, his book on the common law. We're talking about, this is roughly 2010, that I had checked out from the Yale Law Library in 1974. 10 years before I checked out the Watson Library book. And I thought, well, I better send this back. And there's a backstory to this. I left Yale as an undergraduate, having completed all my coursework, but I never really finished my senior essay. So I didn't get my degree. It didn't bother me. I was on to various things, working in family banking institution in Kansas City, et cetera. I didn't need it. Later on, in the 1990s, I edited a book on Winston Churchill and wrote a long introduction. How do I know it was a long introduction? The Times Literary Supplement reviewed the book, liked the book, the essays in the book, essays from lectures given at Westminster College, the Churchill Memorial, and they referred to my introduction as long. And in any case, I thought at that point, maybe my introduction, my long introduction, would serve as my senior essay. And I called up my friend Fred and my roommate, Fred Strebe at Yale, who is the leading teacher of writing at Yale, and he said he would front for me, and he took it to the authorities, and they said, oh yeah, you can do that. So I sent them the book, and actually Fred retyped the essay so it looked like a senior essay at Yale, and nothing happened. So I didn't worry about it. I was off on my banking career, and then I went into my library career. And I thought again, when I went into my library career, maybe, if I introduced myself as actually having a degree, it would be better. And so I started all over again. And they said, well, you didn't have footnotes, and you need footnotes. So I footnoted it and sent it back in, and nothing happened. So then I was packing up my things in my house in Lawrence, and I came across this book, and I sent it back to Yale, and a week later, my degree came. That is the power of the overdue book. I also did the compound interest on fine. You saw Carol's discussion of what percentage of overdues that I'm a part of, overdue years I'm a part of. I did the compound interest on the fine, and I owe the Watson Library at least a wing. So I also thought to mention my connections to Kansas, because I thought that maybe Carol had asked me to do this because I gave a speech at the Spencer Library for an occasion there, and I think one of the reasons Beth Whitaker asked me to do that was that I knew Mrs. Spencer. So I thought Carol probably thought that I knew Carrie Watson. So I want to make sure you all know I did not know Carrie Watson. I rode down Massachusetts that day, but she had already left her building. And I have other connections to Kansas. My great-great-grandfather, Rufus Crosby, came from Minnesota. Winters were too cold for him, so he came to tropical Kansas at the age of 21 in 1854, and he was the youngest signer, one of the 32 signers of the Free State Constitution. And I'm very proud of that. But I'm equally proud of my daughter, my youngest child, who went to Langston Hughes School here in Lawrence. And after 3 years at Langston Hughes, she came to me one day and she said, Dad, I want to start a petition to recall the school board, Lawrence School Board. And I said, well, you're a very enterprising young lady. Can you tell me what your reasoning is? And she said, well, they've taught me the raid on Lawrence 3 years in a row at Langston Hughes, and they're only giving one side of the story. And I said, well, you know that the Lawrence side of the story is pretty much the right side of the story. And she said, yes, Dad, I know it's right, but it's still not the whole story. So I think they need to look and see what else was going on, why the raiders came here. And I said, okay, well, that's a pretty good reason. History should be told in complete context. I said, what's your second reason? She said, well, the Lawrence School Board just raised $10 million for a new football stadium at Free State High School while they were laying off school librarians. And I said, you are my daughter. So I have these connections, and I love Lawrence, and I love the Watson Library, and I'm very glad to be here tonight. I ran what is the largest cultural agency of the federal government, the IMLS, that Carol mentioned. And I say it's the largest federal cultural agency so I can irritate my colleagues at the NEA and the NEH. We did actually spend more money, and we're also the least well-known cultural institution in America. But we were involved in the science of the pandemic. And we've also been involved, one of the things I did and that I wanted to talk about a little bit tonight There are two things I want to talk about, and I will try and keep this brief because I know I'm between you and dancing. But I do two things I want to say. One is about the science of reading. We have been in an interesting moment in that history in that we sort of have rediscovered, and this happens about once every 10 to 15 years. Some of you, well, actually nobody here except me is old enough to remember Why Johnny Can't Read, Rudolf Flush wrote in the 1950s. And then there were all kinds of books about back to basics in the late 60s and in the 70s. And then in the 80s and 90s, there was a woman named Jean Shaw who really represented it. She challenged the whole language movement and the sort of guide on the side versus a sage on the stage view of the world that was true in some institutions of higher learning and teacher ed institutions. And then in the 2000s, Arthur Levine, who was the president of Columbia Teachers College, probably the most important, the most prestigious of teacher education institutions, wrote a series of essays about why there was no good teacher education in the United States, including his own teachers college at Columbia, which I found very interesting. And there has been and this also relates to KU. Many of you will know that some of the most important research done on reading was done here at KU by Hart and Risley. The famous number, 30 million words, that is the differential between what a child of privilege and a child of poverty hears during the course of their childhood. 30 million words is the difference between a literate child and an illiterate child. And much of educational science has been about that and about the brain in recent years, and yet we have failed to take account of this in what has gone on in many of our teacher education institutions and in our libraries. Libraries have become community institutions. They've always been places, and both Barbara and Carol, I think, expressed the beauty and the wonder of a place like the Watson Library, a place where knowledge is available to everyone, a place where people come together and engage in learning. We need to find a way to make that happen in every library and in every school and in every neighborhood, because those 30 million words are happening here. They're happening at Watson, but they're not happening in the neighborhoods that we need to do something about in the United States. And I was very engaged in science at the IMLS and in both the Trump. I'm one of the very few people you will ever meet who ran a cultural agency for both President Trump and President Biden. And that was an experience. Later, over drinks, we can talk about that. But the one thing that I know is that the federal government has become so bureaucratized that they don't even know how to define science. The Biden administration tried to produce a scientific integrity report and an information integrity report, and I questioned what they were doing. I questioned, among other things, the lack of humility of the federal government that did, in my opinion, such a bad job during the course of the pandemic. And I'm happy to go into detail about that later if anyone wants to. But in addition to our problem with the science of reading, and the IMLS tried to do something about that. The first conference that we did after the pandemic allowed us to. So we brought Robert Putnam, the great author of Bowling Alone and other great books about the destruction of community in America. Marianne Wolf, who I think is the leading advocate for the understanding of the brain, how children learn, what the brain teaches us about how children learn at an early age, to talk about how to make libraries focus, induce libraries to focus, not make. We don't make librarians do anything. To induce libraries, to encourage libraries to focus more on literacy. But Carol also mentioned in her introduction, and this is the last thing I will talk about before I send you off to dance, and maybe it'll put some liveliness in your step to think about this. She mentioned the PBS series that we did at the IMLS. The IMLS had never done anything like that before. And I wanted to do something that allowed us to participate in a formative way, in an inspirational way, in America 250, the 250th anniversary of the Declaration and American nationhood that is coming up. And I wanted to do something that would be truly inclusive, and inclusive in an inspirational way. So much of our universe is polarized around things like DEIA, where there's the 1619 project on one side and the 1776 project on the other side, which are both ideological in nature. Some good history in the 1619 project, not very much in the 1776 project. Again, I'd be happy to talk about that over a drink. But I wanted to do something that was truly inclusive and inspirational. So what we did, and it was mainly through museums that we did this, was we did a series called Visions of America. And we started off by interviewing Danielle Allen of Harvard and Yuval Levin of the American Enterprise Institute about what's wrong with civics in America. What can we do to bring people together? And we established that as a sort of baseline of what we wanted to do. Interviewed Jeffrey Rosen of the Constitution Center about that. And they were all eloquent, but I wanted to demonstrate it. So we went to Freedom Tower in Miami. And Freedom Tower in Miami is the building, at one point it was the tallest building in the southeastern United States, the building that the federal government took over in the early 1960s to welcome 640,000 Cuban exiles to become citizens of the United States, and who've turned Miami and other parts of Florida into flourishing places, an institution like Miami-Dade College into a flourishing college, an extraordinary place, 120,000 students, Miami-Dade College. And we talked to Ada Ferrer, the Pulitzer Prize-winning historian of the relationship of Cuba and the United States, and Carlos Ayer, who wrote the wonderful memoir, Waiting for Snow in Havana, one of the great American memoirs. And then we went to the Wing Luke Museum. And to step back for a second, immigration has become a huge firestorm in American politics. And a lot of what I'm going to tell you is about why immigration, why race shouldn't be treated the way it's being treated today, that there are other ways to do it. So we told the story of those immigrants. We went to the Wing Luke Museum in Seattle, which is the only pan-Asian American museum representing all of the more than a dozen Asian American communities, a dozen different ethnicity Asian American communities in the United States. And there we told a number of different stories. Gary Locke, who was the first Asian American governor in the lower 48. But we also told the story of the Nisei Regiment in World War II. And some of you will know about this, but every American should know about this. We, as you know, sent Japanese Americans living on the coasts into internment camps. They were forced to sell their businesses, sell their homes, bring their entire families into what was essentially a concentration camp. They made the camps much better. They humanized the camps, but they were concentration camps in essence. Out of those internment camps, young men who were not drafted, you couldn't draft Japanese American boys during World War II until the end of the war. Many of them volunteered after debating the question with their parents and with some other young men and women. They volunteered to join the United States Army and became the Nisei Regiment. Sorry, this is a little emotional for me. They fought in Italy, they fought in France, they fought in Germany, and they're the most decorated regiment in American history, 4,000 Purple Hearts. We told their story, including the story of Beth Takakawa's father, who was one of those boys she was the director of the museum, and her father had been in an internment camp where he had to give, at the age of 21, the talk at the wake for two of his friends who were killed in Europe. From there, we went to the Heard Museum. in Phoenix, where I talked to Walter Echo Hawk, who is the leading lawyer in creating what is the contemporary version of Native American rights. And we talked about the story that I still find one of the great American stories, again, which very few people know. Native Americans in World War I volunteered, and in World War II volunteered at higher levels than any other group. In World War I, that is particularly noticeable because they were not, the majority of Native Americans, it's a complicated subject, but the majority of Native Americans were not citizens of the United States. They were code talkers. They experienced war as much as any other group. And then in 1924, a Republican Congress, which should, perhaps some Republicans should be reminded today, and Calvin Coolidge signed into law making Native American citizens 1924 for the first time. We told their story and the story of the code talkers in World War II as well. And then last but not least, we came to Kansas City. And in Kansas City, we went to 18th and Vine, and we told the story of the Negro Leagues, and we told the story of Kansas City Jazz, and we told the story of Kansas City Barbecue. And what I was trying to do with all of this was to tell a story that is truly inclusive, that gives agency to the people who were discriminated against, who were periodically, in the case of black people in this country, deeply and for a long time oppressed, and what they did with that, how they overcame it, gives them agency, shows us the gifts that they gave us, those of us more privileged than they, that privileged us with those gifts. One of the most important statements, I believe, in the 20th century was a statement by a woman named Simone Weil. Some of you will know that she was a philosopher, a labor activist, a Jew who thought about becoming a Catholic, spent her time in churches when nobody else was there, wrote a beautiful book called Waiting for God, and was asked by General de Gaulle to write the program of the French resistance for when it would come back to power at the end of the war. And the first sentence in her book, The Need for Roots, is the most important sentence of the 20th century, and a sentence we should remember today. And that sentence is, obligations precede rights. I think all of the debates about immigration, about discrimination, about DEIA in this country, and I saw a lot of DEIA proposals at the IMLS, et cetera, look at the world in the wrong way. We are a rights-engaged, enabled, ennobled, and overwhelmed nation, and we should be. And our rights are an important thing, but so are our obligations. One of the things that I love about librarians is they know that. They feel an obligation to knowledge, they feel an obligation to their community, and they feel an obligation to the transcendent nature of education in a democracy, in a republic. And so the last thing I want to say to you is this great institution is one that should be supported, the one that should be inspired by what you do in the community and for what it does in the community. And we must never, never abandon the obligation as Jefferson saw it, as George Washington saw it, as James Madison saw it, as Frederick Douglass saw it. The only sustenance of a republic is an educated people. Thank you.
just a sec. No, I was supposed to say some funny things, but that was amazing. Thank you so much. But I'm going to try to lighten it up a little bit because you talked about, you've had that book for a long time. You're not going to keep it for another 60 years, but it obviously meant a lot to you. En-Merkar and the Lord of Arata, a Sumerian epic tale of Iraq and Iran by, actually, I was pleased to find out just how prolific and important Samuel Noah Kramer was in his field of study. So I hope you don't have this one.
No, I don't.
Okay.
Well, I did.
Because as a small token of our appreciation for you being here tonight and for the time and energy that you've devoted to all of the work that you do, we're going to present you with your own copy, which is actually surprisingly hard to find. So you can enjoy the Sumerian tales on the up and up. So thank you. We also want to, well, one more thing. You said you like libraries.
And Rock Chalk Jayhawk.
Oh, excuse me. That's okay. Yes, the last thing we have for you is a copy of the Jayhawk, the story of the University of Kansas' beloved mascot by our own former KU archivist Becky Schulte. And we hope with these 2 volumes you continue to keep KU close to your heart. And thank you so, so much.
Thank you.
All right. The library couldn't do what we do without our cherished campus partners who connect us to wide-ranging Jayhawk communities. So I want to recognize Heath Peterson. Heath is here. Oh, there again. For those of you who don't know, Heath is president of KU Alumni Association, and thank you so much for your longstanding partnership with the libraries. Likewise, we are so grateful for the support of our collaborators at KU Endowment. I think many of them are here tonight, our colleagues Amy Gray, Michael Arp, Nancy Jackson, and Dan Martin. Will you all please wave? Yay! These professionals are dedicated to helping the libraries reach our goals that are only possible with philanthropic support. We thank them and all of your other colleagues throughout the organization of KUEA. So now I have the pleasure of welcoming Dan Martin, president of KU Endowment, to the stage. The podium is yours, Dan.
Well, thank you so much. Crosby, thank you for your words, for your leadership and your influence in this space, for a reminder to reflect on our past and how that can inform our present and consider how we should move into the future. So thank you so much. Well, unlike the provost who mentioned she has 4 degrees, I only have 3 degrees from KU, but one of them is a law degree. And I heard when Crosby was talking an offer of a new wing for Watson. Offer accepted, so we have an agreement. I look forward to chatting with you about that. Thank you so much. A bird bath, all right. Well, I'm one of 4 children in my family, an educator, an engineer, an artist, and an entrepreneur. And when my mother wanted to engage us in thought and experiment and creativity and imagination, she took us to the library. In those days, it was Corinth Library in Prairie Village. And she exposed us to things that we could learn and explore creatively, imaginatively, and learn about ourselves and perhaps our future. So for me, it was from Corinth Library to KU Library and any number of libraries in between. That was shaping me in not only who I would become, but who I was becoming. And libraries continue to inform who I am becoming. And Crosby, your talk tonight helped shape how I might think about some of the things that we experience today and what my role might be and who I am becoming. Well, now as a professional, it's certainly a pleasure to be interacting professionally with KU Libraries. Our partnership at KU Endowment with KU Libraries goes back well over 100 years to our founding, 133 years ago, KU Endowment's founding. Our very first endowment was actually an endowment to purchase literary works for the library. Exists and continues today. You mentioned Spooner Hall. Spooner Hall was the gift of William B. Spooner in his estate, which was facilitated by KU Endowment. In fact, William B. Spooner was the uncle of our chancellor, Chancellor Snow, at the time. And in the 1950s, the Alumni Association and KU Endowment collectively combined to begin a new fund. It was the Greater University Fund. And through those campaigns, they produced pamphlets. And one of the pamphlets that talked about KU Libraries and Watson Library talked about the investment that private monies make that go beyond the budget that the libraries have to really move the library into places of distinction and pursue excellence. In fact, Chancellor Murphy, in his last address, the last biennial address that he gave in 1960, talked about philanthropy in its context with the university. And he said, philanthropy was the crucial factor in the ultimate development of the University of Kansas. And it's true today. Our mission at KU Endowment is to partner with donors in providing philanthropic support toward our vision of building a greater University of Kansas. Tonight, I know you're in this room because you support the University of Kansas. You have supported Watson Library and KU Libraries. We are a greater institution because of your investments. Watson Library is greater because of your investment. And your presence tonight communicates and demonstrates that we are greater together in our community in building a greater KU, a greater Watson, a greater KU Library system. So thank you for your investment and for your presence. Well, tonight we have the privilege to see this in action. I'm going to invite Janet Sinelli, co-chair of the Watson Centennial, and Ken Stevens, chair of the library's Board of Advocates, to the podium.
Thanks, Dan. Well, Dean Smith, Carol, my friend, we'd like to invite you to come up to the podium. We have a little surprise for you, and I'm trying to find out where is it? Oh, here we go. Carol, I'm very excited to share with you the Board of Advocates raised $100,000 in recognition of 100 years of our iconic and beautiful Watson Library. On behalf of the Board of Advocates, Ken and I present you with this $100,000 check to honor you and your staff in support of the great work happening at KU Libraries.
Check this large. And I mean that in multiple ways.
We couldn't have done this without Amy Gray's help. So we just want to recognize Amy Gray and how wonderful she is and how special she is, both to KU Endowment and also to the Board of Advocates. Amy, you're a special woman. But now I'd like to invite everyone to join me to dance, drink, eat if you still have dessert, and celebrate 100 years of the Grand Dame of our beautiful KU campus, Watson Library. So go dance, everybody, come on.
Wow. I'll see you all on the dance floor.
And we know you can
Hear the
dance.
music. Thank you. Thank you, Board of Advocates. Thank you, everyone. What an incredible evening. I am speechless, and they didn't warn us that we needed tissues up here. I'm following Crosby. Thank you. I think it would be fun to take it to the bank. Where do we put this?
In your office.
Tonight. Wow. Okay. Let's
You want to
give
get
the
some photos down there? Okay. All right. I can't top that. Thank you. I'm supposed to thank Dan on the script, but of course, that turned out a whole lot differently. So thank you so much to the Board of Advocates. I also wanted to say a quick thanks to not only Christy, but Christine Montz, Kevin McCarty, Nikki Perch, and Wendy Conover. I think you would agree with me that this team has knocked tonight out of the park. And how? In addition to tonight's jaw-dropping event, they've created an entire semester of activities for students, families, the KU community, and Lawrence and beyond. So if you haven't joined any of these other activities, please do so. One of the things that we've done is, in addition to a lot of other things, we've had some dance lessons. Jake Fisher is one of the most amazing dance instructors I've ever seen. He's here tonight. He taught us that there is no wrong way to dance. So let's join the hoofers as they cut a rug, and the bar is reopening. You can get your giggle water, and I'm turning the night's entertainment over to Anna Lee and the Lucky So-and-Sos, so hit it.